So it never came to anything. But from that really kind of, I guess it boosted our ability to be able to handle situations. And the security company I worked for at that point, they began to use us. I worked with guys that were ex-military guys. There was a guy who was a former paratrooper, a guy from the South African Special Forces, a few other guys like that, and we formed a tight team. So our company began to use us to go to nightclubs around Burnley and Bolton, all these areas up your way, mate. I don't think we worked in Widnes, but Blackburn, Burnley, Oldham, Liverpool, all the places. We would get sent to where the local bouncers had lost control. Because you come from a fairly small town, Shaun. You know, in those small towns, you've got gangsters who have a reputation. If there's any problems, there's going to be comebacks. So, for instance, say a group of local hard men from Widnes had gone into a nightclub. There'd been a problem with the bouncers. You know, next week they're going to come back and they're going to want revenge, and then ends this cycle, you know. And of course, you get the whole attitude, don't you? I'm sure you've heard it many times in your life. Do you know who I am? And I couldn't give a toss who you are, because I don't really care about people's reputations, which is a dangerous thing, because you should actually care about people's reputations, I discovered. But I didn't really care about that. And every town has them. Do you know who I am? And maybe it's something they did 20 years ago. Maybe 20 years ago they pulled a shotgun out on somebody and they've lived off that one incident for 20 years, and you don't want to mess with him because he's a psycho, and then everyone's scared of him. And I didn't go along with that particularly well. But how you deal with that situation in places like Widnes or Burnley or Blackburn or Oldham is, if you bring in a team of men who are highly trained from outside into that situation, and those guys turn up and they want to storm in or not pay or come in, and you don't let them, and they go, do you know who I am? And you go, I couldn't care less who you are, mate. That's how you solve the situation, because either they're going to back off or it's going to end quite violently. We always had the upper hand, because usually at that point they're either coked up or drunk, and so it's easier to beat these fellas when they're like that, you know. And we were really highly trained, and we were proficient at what we did, and so our company used us to go to these different nightclubs where lots of violent situations happened, particularly in Blackburn.
Have you got stories of any that were really problematic?
Yeah, I think the first problematic one was Blackburn, and then Preston. What I found is and also then Manchester. Manchester was very problematic, but what I discovered, like in Liverpool, Scousers are more ready to have a one-on-one. They'll have a go. They'll have a go straight away. So if a guy's trying to get into a club or a problem, you're saying you ain't coming in, he'll have a go with you then and there, right? One-on-one, mate. Let's do it, you know. Whereas in those other places, they always get on the phone. So if you'd worked in Liverpool first and you've gone to like Manchester or Blackburn, you're kind of expecting confrontation straight away, but you don't get it, and they just back off and they go, "You're getting it, mate," you know. We're having you. And they get on the phone, and then for various reasons they're trying to establish who you're working for, because they don't want to tread on someone's toes, whether you've got backup or they're trying to get backup, and they're always trying to get you shot. And the amount of times they're going to get you shot, you're getting shot in Manchester. Oh man, countless times you're going to get shot. But problems in Blackburn initially were, I think, again, small town mentality, small town comebacks, but there'd been a bit of a problem with the previous bouncers. One of the bouncers had his arm broken in a fight, and usually what we do when we took over a new door, we'd keep one or two of the previous doormen. We'd offer them a job so that they could point us to the guys who were banned. So you always needed at least one of them to say, them guys, they're trouble and they're not. We would go in and then try and re-establish order, clean up the nightclub, and then put in a permanent local team. So that was our job. So we would go with shin pads, cricket boxes, stab-proof vests, knuckle dusters, collapsible truncheons, the whole works. It would be a very, very, very violent, zero tolerance, zero drugs, zero tolerance, very hard to try and establish order. And so that really became my life. And because I was cold-hearted, because I was an angry young man, I guess, that violent aspect excited me. I enjoyed, to my shame today, going home at night with blood on my shirt or boasting about those teeth that got knocked in, and that was just the sick idiot that I was in those days. And but I enjoyed it. So when it kicked off, we made sure that we handled it properly. But these guys came back who broke this bouncer's arm, and so we very methodically planned how to get these guys out of the club. And we got the ringleader, and that I broke his leg. We put his leg over 2 beer crates and dropped something heavy on it, and it broke, and that resolved that situation. And again, I didn't care about that. It was nothing to me. But Manchester was particularly crazy because there was a lot of drive-by shootings there. So there was a club called JFK's that we worked at near Sale, and there was bullet holes in the doorway where there'd been a drive-by shooting the night before. Now,
The night before.
the night before. So the manager there was connected to this guy called Jason Donovan. It was a Scottish guy called Billy Mack, and he wanted a new team in because the local team had lost control now. So we got taken up to Manchester. Now, bear in mind, the bouncers who are working there don't know that they're about to be sacked as well. So that can create problems, you know. So we had a guy that was our manager, Big Mick. He was 22, 23 stone. He was connected with one of the Gladiators. Remember the Gladiator series when it first came out? He was called Warrior. He was like the biggest gladiator, the blonde-haired guy. Micah Hearn was his name. And Micah Hearn was connected with a copper in Liverpool who was bent. I don't know if the word bent has different connotations now, but a bent copper meant...
Crooked.
A crooked copper. Has different connotations today. But he was a bent copper called Ellie. Ellie was one of the highest ranking police officers that got sent to jail. He was making deals with Curtis Stone and the big drug dealer from Liverpool. I can't remember his name.
Warren. Curtis
yeah.
Warren.
Curtis Warren.
Yeah.
So he was connected with them, and there was a guy that he was working for. He was passing information to these people, and Ellie ended up getting arrested. Micah Hearn Warrior was sharing a house with this particular guy. And when it all came out, and then Warrior was kicked off of Gladiators, he needed to make money, so he started a security firm with our mate, and so that opened a lot of doors for us because of his personality status. So that's how we ended up getting this door in Manchester. But we drove up there, and we get told while we're outside in the car, just wait there, I've just got to go in and sack the other bouncers. So it's like, okay, this is going to be interesting. And, 10 minutes later, guys coming out, slamming the door, walking off, all angry. But 2 of them were kept on. And that club was wild because you had guys turning up there with guns. There was metal detectors to come in. So guys were turning up with guns. And that was a whole learning curve for me, Shaun, because I was very confrontational. And you can't be that confrontational with people who've got guns because they're going to want to come and shoot you. So you have to learn the language, you have to learn the whole respect thing, and come to some mutual arrangements with us. So you learn a lot of negotiating skills, which my brother was better at than me because I was too hard-headed. I was so hard-headed that there was contracts put out in my life. There was guys sitting in a car park with guns that wanted to shoot me, and my brother found out. But he knew the guys. He was friendly with the guys that knew the guys that wanted to shoot me, and so he chatted to them and said, look, my brother, he don't know the score, he's just too hot-headed, and so promises were made, and I wasn't shot. So, yeah, it was a learning curve for me. I didn't know it all, and I wasn't, like I say, pretending to be the hardest man in the world.
There was a story where a guy comes in and the metal detector beeped, and you had to handle that. Yeah,
that was quite interesting because again, it was my brother who handled it more than me. When it beeps, of course, you've got to search people. Well, they don't want to be searched, and now they're carrying guns into your club, and the last thing you want in a kickoff is guns, and these were pretty serious guys, and in the club already were 2 just normal guys. They were like city guys. They had nice suits on, and they were out of place here. So they maybe wandered into the wrong area of town, but they were in like that. And we stopped these guys coming in with guns, and it was getting a bit confrontational. My brother came over, And my brother whispered in their ears, had a little word with them. They looked over at these customers sitting over there in the suits, and then the guys were like, yeah, cheers man. And then they left. And they went to put their guns in their car, and then they came back in. And I said to my brother, what was the deal there? He said, I just said to these guys with the guns, see them guys over there, 5-0. They're 5-0, they're undercover cops. They've looked at them and went, oh yeah. He said, I'm just giving you the heads up. Don't bring them, they called them tings. Don't bring them tings in here. So my brother was like, don't bring them tings in here. Put them in the car, come back in, and I'll sort you out a drink. And the guys were like, yeah, man, respect. So he made new friends that way, right? And then half an hour later, the suits left anyway. They weren't cops. They were just normal partners. They left. And that was it. So we learned how to deal with it by giving them some heads up and say, look, you can't bring them things in here, okay? You're quite happy to come in. I learned really off my Uncle George all those years back in Soho. One night there was a group of Marines turned up. It's about 12, 14 of them. And they're all big lads. And they all wanted to come in without pay. Now, I know they're going to come in, they're going to get ripped off, it's going to kick off, right? So they want to come in without pain. They're standing, they're arguing with me, and I'm going to get my head kicked in. I can't fight 12 Marines, for goodness sake, you know? Be lucky if I could fight one Marine, let alone 12 with him. And anyway,
UK Marines or US Marines?
No, they were UK.
UK Royal Marines.
Yeah, Royal Marines,
yeah.
Right? And my Uncle George, Uncle George is a big guy. The Scottish accent as well kind of helped with the intimidation. But my Uncle George went, which one of you's the hardest? Right, and this guy stepped forward like that. He says, I am. And he's obviously thinking he's going to have a go. And my uncle went, right, you're in for free. Drinks are free all night for you. But you look after the rest of your pals and make them pay. And of course, now this Marine, he's the hardest one. He's like, right, lads, line up, lads, everyone pay. You know, and then he's got them all in order. And they didn't get ripped off. They got drinks at a normal price. They got to see girls and lingerie and all of that. They were quite happy. But every now and again, my uncle would go down and he'd go up to the hard one and he'd say, "You keeping your lads in order?" "Yeah, I'm keeping them in order." And George would go, "Get him another drink," you know. So I learned a valuable lesson there. I thought that was it was very, very clever because he used the hardest one to keep the rest of them in order, and they weren't going to back up because we would control them. So I kind of tried to use some of that technique in Manchester and learning from my brother a little bit. My brother was a little bit more clever. I was a bit more brutal. It got crazy, but also we had a lot of great backup there. There was a guy called Brian who was what they call a head. So you have different heads in Manchester, and he was a head. So a head would be a guy that's risen above the ranks in whatever gang he's in, and he was a known head. He looked a bit like you, bald hair, a bit stockier than you, about your height. But Brian was a very, very dangerous man, and I found out why. Both his wife and kids were murdered.
What?
And Brian then didn't have anything to live for. He didn't care. And I said to him one time, "Brian, how come like you just don't care? Like you don't care about your life?" And I remember him saying to me, he always used to call me kiddo. "Right, kiddo." You know the way them manx are, "You're all right, mate, you're all right." He says, when a man ain't got anything to live for, he's the most dangerous man. Because he don't care. So I always remember him saying, like, you know, if you've got nothing to live for, you don't care. You don't fear anything. And I think that had risen him up through the ranks after his wife and kids were murdered.
Did you find out why they were murdered?
Because he was a drug dealer, and there was rival drug dealers, and they petrol bombed his house. His wife and kids were burned to death in the house, and so he didn't care after that.
Wow.
So like the first night I met him, so he had a connection with the Warrior and with our boss, and the first night we were on that door, you know, all these Range Rovers again turned up, and like, I don't know, maybe 14, 16 black guys all got out. They all kind of lined the streets, and I'm saying to the other bouncers, "Man, it's going off here. Who are this lot? Get yourselves ready. Either we're getting out the back, right, or it's going to go off, right? But whatever happens, be prepared." And they're all like looking up and down the street and making sure that the coast's clear. And the next minute, there's this like white guy with a bald head gets out with his leather coat on. He's like that, you know. And then they escort him to the door. Right. So I'm thinking, okay, this is quite serious. And then my mate goes, "Oh, it's Brian. He's one of the heads. We're connected with him." So I was like, whew. So that was good. And then you learn Manchester politics then, really. The whole not doing something then and there, like Scousers they'll take you on straight away. They call it a straightener, right? Scousers, let's have a straightener then, mate. Manx don't do that, you know. They'll get on the phone. So there was one guy who was notorious, an ex-boxer called James, bit of a psycho as well, and he was banned from the club. So the first night we're on the door, we've kept one of their doormen, and we see this guy James coming along, and Damon says to me, "Oh, see that guy? He's banned." He says he's a nutcase though, but he's banned. Like he glassed some girl with a bottle or something. He's a proper nutcase. He was on medication and everything. He's bipolar. He's this, that, and the other. And I said, okay, we'll go out and have a chat with him. So I've gone out. Next thing, the door's shut. And Damon's not even coming out. Right? So I thought, here we go. And anyway, I've confronted this guy, James. You ain't coming in. And it got confrontational. Never turned violent. He says, you're dead, man. I'm going to have you shot. And he left. So I went back in, and Damon said, like, what did he say? I said, he's going to have me shot. He said, oh, crap. If he's going to have you shot, he's going to have you shot. So a phone call was then made to Brian, one of the heads. They went round in their Range Rovers and visited James and had a pleasant conversation. And the next day, James came up to the door and wanted to apologise and say how sorry he was for threatening to shoot me.
Wow.
There was no violence took place, but it was just enough that they paid him a visit, and so we had the backup there. But it got crazy. But I have to say, I think I was probably a bit of an idiot, and I would lose it. I would confront guys that I shouldn't have confronted. I was lucky to walk away from that, I think.
There was a situation in the book that ended up in like an armed battle on the street and bodies were strewn everywhere.
Oh, that was in Preston. That was some little tiny club called Cheeky Monkeys. It was a student bar. It was down one of the side streets, not on the main strip where Tokyo Joe's was and all that. It was like down one of these side alleys. And it was infested with drug dealers. And again, we got moved in. It was a lovely old fella, an Italian guy. He had a restaurant over the road and his son. And they were just gentle people, nice people. They weren't gangsters. They were restaurateurs. They'd opened this nightclub because the property became vacant across the road. They were just genuine nice guys. But they got in over their heads. And now drug dealers were coming in from Manchester and just ruining the place, you know. So we came in quite hard again, hard tactics, and we threw them all out. I worked with, a team of good guys. I had the para there, the South African Special Forces guy, my brother, a few other guys from Birkenhead. We were all tooled up with nunchuckers and truncheons and knuckle dusters and stuff like that. But these guys kicked off one night. We threw them all out onto the street. Again, it kicked off outside. They were like kicking the door. And so we just went out. We said, right, let's just have them. And we went out into the street. They had no idea what they were getting themselves into, those guys. And they were all on drugs. They were all taking temazepam and all sorts of stuff, you know. It was very, very brutal. And by the end of it, I think there was about 8 or 9 of them unconscious on the floor. It got really violent. And every single one of them was knocked out. And I had overstepped the mark. I had to pull some of the guys off because they didn't quite have the self-control that I had. But it was very proficient. I mean, it was very proficient. One guy had a bottle, and I worked well with Jay, the paratrooper. So as I gave the guy a leg sweep, he went up in the air. Jay elbowed him. By the time he went down, he was unconscious. This guy was an ex-gymnast as well, this paratrooper. So he could do a standing backflip. He'd just stand and just do a backflip, you know. And he was into Aikido, and he hipped through this guy, and he actually went right across the other side of the street and landed on the pavement. I'd never seen anything like it before, you know. It was like what you see in a movie. I actually seen a guy upside down in the air and then
wow,
unconscious. So it was very brutal, and I knew straight away this is going to end badly. The police are going to turn up. People were calling ambulances. It's going to be bad. What we did do is we carried extra shirts, clean shirts with us, because guys had bloodstains or ripped shirts. All of them had knuckle dusters on. And so immediately I got the team together and I says, right, everybody get in the back, get rid of your shirts, right, clean yourselves off, get rid of all your weapons. Put your clean shirts on, look presentable. And the next thing you know, this copper turns up at the door and he's like, what's going on out here? There's bodies all over the place. You lot have done this. And I said, officer, honestly, we haven't done anything. These guys here, I said, we did throw 3 of them out and they started a gang fight amongst themselves. We just shut the door and I couldn't even tell you what happened. The next thing you know, we opened the door and they're all unconscious. The copper was like, yeah, you lot have done it. So he lined us all up and he wanted inspectors, and he was inspecting our shirts. He got everyone's hands to make sure we didn't have blood, or he couldn't prove anything, and he got really annoyed. And he said to me, when they wake up in hospital and they give a statement, I'm going to come back and arrest all of you. Fortunately for them as well, they did all recover. They woke up in hospital, but fortunately for us, they were all on temazepam and they couldn't remember a single thing. None of them knew how they ended up in hospital, so we kind of got away with that. But yeah, it was crazy, violent situations all the time, because you're dealing with troubled nightclubs, places like I say, Oldham, and just again, I mean, they're just repetitions of the same story. I could tell you these stories all night, but you guys are going to get bored listening to it. They're just repetitions. Another town, another drug dealer, another broken face, and another getting away with it. So, but I guess what was happening is the level of violence was increasing in my life, and how far you were prepared to go.